Mantras of our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, surrender is giving oneself to the divine, to give everything one is or has to the divine, and regard nothing as one's own, to obey only the divine will and no other, to live for the divine and not for the ego. With always our love and blessings, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, Book 1, The Book of Beginnings, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge, page 81. Earth's borders recede, and the terrestrial air hangs round him, no longer its transcendent veil. He has crossed the limit of mortal thought and hope. He has reached the world's end and stares beyond. The eyes of mortal body plunge their gaze into eyes that look upon eternity. A greater world time's traveler must explore. At last he hears a chanting on the heights, and the far speaks, and the unknown grows near. He crosses the boundaries of the unseen and passes over the edge of mortal sight to a new vision of himself and things. He is a spirit in an unfinished world that knows him not and cannot know itself. The surface symbol of his goalless quest takes deeper meanings to his inner view. His is a search of darkness for the light, of mortal life for immortality. In the vessel of an earthly embodiment, over the narrow rails of limiting sense, he looks out on the magic waves of time, where mind, like a moon, illumines the world's dark. There is limned, ever retreating from the eyes, as if in a tenuous, misty dreamlight drawn, the outline of a dim, mysterious shore. A sailor on the inconscious, fathomless sea, he voyages through a starry world of thought, on matter's deck to a spiritual sun. Across the noise and multitudinous cry, across the rapt, unknowable silences, through a strange mid-world under supernal sights, beyond earth's longitudes and latitudes, his goal is fixed outside all present maps. But none learns whither, through the unknown, he sails, or what secret mission the Great Mother gave. In the hidden strength of her omnipotent will, driven by her breath across life's tossing deep, through the thunder's roar and through the windless hush, through fog and mist, where nothing more is seen, he carries her sealed orders in his breast. Late will he know, opening the mystic script, whether to a blank port in the unseen he goes, or armed with her faith, to discover a new mind and body in the city of God, and enshrine the immortal in his glory's house, and make the finite one with infinity. Across the salt waste of the endless years, her ocean winds impel his errant boat, the cosmic waters plashing as he goes, a rumor around him, and danger under call. Always he follows in her force wake. He sails through life and death and other life. He travels on through waking and through sleep. A power is on him from her occult force that ties him to his own creation's fate, and never can the mighty traveler rest, and never can the mystic voyage cease, till the nescient dusk is lifted from man's soul, and the morns of God have overtaken his night. As long as nature lasts, he too is there, for this is sure that he and she are one. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, SABCL, Book Letters on Yoga, Volume 2, Part 2, Section 1, The Object of Integral Yoga. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the object of integral yoga is to enter into and be possessed by the divine's presence and consciousness, to love the divine for the divine's sake alone, to be tuned in our nature into the nature of the divine, and in our will and works and life to be the instrument of the divine. Its object is not to be a great yogi or a superman, although that may come, or to grab at the divine for the sake of the ego's power, pride, or pleasure. It is not for moksha, though liberation comes by it, and all else may come, but these must not be our objects. The divine alone is our object. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, to come to this integral yoga merely with the idea of being a superman would be an act of vital egoism which would defeat its own object. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, those who put this object in the front of their preoccupations invariably come to grief spiritually and otherwise. The aim of this integral yoga, says our Lord, is first to enter into the divine consciousness by merging into it the separate ego. Incidentally, in doing so, one finds one's true individual self, which is not the limited, vain, and selfish human ego, but a portion of the divine. And secondly, to bring down the supramental consciousness on earth to transform mind, life, and body. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, all else can only be a result of these two aims, not the primary object of integral yoga. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, you must get out of certain wrong ideas that you seem to have about integral yoga, for these are dangerous and ought to be thrown away by every sadhak. First, the object of integral yoga is not to become like Sri Aurobindo or the Mother. Those who cherish this idea easily come to the further idea that they can become their equals and even greater. This is only to feed the ego. Second, the object of integral yoga is not to get power or to be more powerful than others, or to have great siddhis or to do great or wonderful or miraculous things. Third, the object of integral yoga is not to be a great yogi or a superman. This is an egoistic way of taking the integral yoga and can lead no good. Avoid it altogether. Fourth, to talk about the supramental and think of bringing it down in yourself is the most dangerous of all. It may bring an entire megalomania and loss of balance. What the sadhak has to seek is the full opening to the divine, the psychic change of his consciousness, the spiritual change. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says what the sadhak has to seek is the full opening to the divine, the psychic change of his consciousness, the spiritual change. Of that change of consciousness, selflessness, desirelessness, humility, bhakti, surrender, calm, equality, peace, quiet sincerity are necessary constituents. Until he has the psychic and spiritual change, to think of being supramental is an absurdity and an arrogant absurdity. All these egoistic ideas, if indulged, can only aggrandize the ego, spoil the sadhana, and lead to other serious spiritual dangers. They should be rejected altogether. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, of course, you can do yoga without being great. There is no need of being great. On the contrary, humility is the first necessity, for one who has ego and pride cannot realize the highest. There are two main elements. The first is the acceptance of the world as a manifestation of the divine, not its rejection as a mistake or an illusion. And secondly, the character of this manifestation as a spiritual evolution with yoga, as a means for the transformation of mind, life, and body into instruments of a spiritual and supramental perfection. The universe is not only a material but a spiritual fact. Life not only is a play of forces or a mental experience but a field for the evolution of the concealed spirit. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says human life will receive its fulfillment and transformation into something beyond itself only when this truth is seized and made the motive force of our existence and the means of its effective realization discovered. The means of realization, says our Lord, is to be found in an integral yoga, a union in all parts of our being with the divine, and a consequent transmutation of all their now zarring elements into the harmony of a higher divine consciousness and existence. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, the way of integral yoga followed here has a different purpose from others. For its aim is not only to rise out of the ordinary, ignorant world consciousness into the divine consciousness, but to bring the supramental power of that divine consciousness down into the ignorance of mind, life, and body, to transform them to manifest the divine here and create a divine life in matter. This is an exceedingly difficult aim and difficult yoga, and to many or most it will seem impossible. All the established forces of the ordinary ignorant world consciousness are opposed to it and deny it and try to prevent it. And the sadhak will find his own mind, life, and body full of the most obstinate impediments to its realization. If you can accept the ideal wholeheartedly, face all the difficulties, leave the past and its ties behind you, and are ready to give up everything and risk everything for this divine possibility, then only can you hope to discover by experience the truth behind it. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the sadhana of this integral yoga does not proceed through any set of mental teaching or prescribed forms of meditations, mantras, or others, but by aspiration, by a self concentration, inwards or upwards, by self opening to an influence to the divine power above us and its workings to the divine presence in the heart, and by the rejection of all that is foreign to all these things. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it is only by faith, aspiration, and surrender that this self opening can come. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, you have apparently a call and may be fit for yoga, but there are different paths and each has a different aim and end before it. It is common to all the paths to conquer the desires, to put aside the ordinary relations of life and try to pass from uncertainty for everlasting certitude. One may also try to conquer dream and sleep, thirst and hunger, etc. But it is no part of this integral yoga to have nothing to do with the world or life or to kill the senses or entirely inhibit their action. It is the object of this integral yoga to transform life by bringing down into it the divine light, power, and bliss of the divine truth and its dynamic certitudes. This integral yoga is not a yoga of world shunning asceticism, but of divine life. Your object, on the other hand, can only be gained by entering into samadhi and ceasing in it from all connection with the world existence. It is not indispensable to be an ascetic. It is enough if one can learn to live within, in the inner being, instead of on the surface, discover the soul or the true individuality, which is veiled by the surface mind and life forces, and open the inner being to the supraconscient reality. But in this, one cannot succeed unless one is wholly sincere and one pointed in the effort. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, as to the second question, participation in Sri Aurobindo's mission depends on capacity to do a difficult yoga or on a call to devote oneself to that ideal without the thought of the claims of the ego or the vital desires. Otherwise, it is better not to think of it. Unless the external nature is transformed, one may go as high as possible and have the largest experiences, but the external mind remains an instrument of ignorance. It is always possible to have realizations of a kind on the mental spiritual plane, even if the vital is still impure. There is a sort of separation of the mental Purusha and Prakriti, which results in the knowledge that has no transforming effect on life. But the theory of these yogis is that one has to know the self, life, and what one does in life does not matter. To be in full union with the divine is the final aim. When one has some kind of a constant union, one can be called a yogi, but the union has to be made complete. There are yogis who have only the union on the spiritual plane, others who are united in the mind and heart, others in the vital also. In integral yoga, our aim is to be united in the physical consciousness and on the supramental plane. But why should they, the yogis of the traditional past, feel any pressure of the descent of the supermind when they are satisfied with the realization they have? Because they live in the spiritual mind, and the nature of the mind is to separate some high aspect or the state of the divine and seek that to the exclusion of all else. All the spiritual philosophies and schools of yoga do that. If they go beyond, it is to the absolute. Mind cannot conceive of the absolute except as something inconceivable, neti neti. However, Forgetting samadhi, that is balance, they concentrate on one single idea. What they reach is that which is represented by that idea. The samadhi is, in its nature, an exclusive concentration on that. So, why should it open them to anything else? There are only a few who have sufficiently been plastic to escape from this self limitation of the sadhana. What they experience is that there is no end to the realization. When you get to one peak, you find another beyond it. In order to see more than this, one has to get into conscious waking touch with the supramental, or at least get a glimpse of it, and that means passing beyond spiritual mind. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says it is the very principle of this integral yoga that only by supramentalization of the consciousness, which means rising above mind to supermind and the descent of the supermind into the nature, can the final transformation be made. So, if anybody can rise above mind to supermind or obtain the descent of the supermind, then logically this yoga becomes impossible. Every being is in essence one with the divine, and in his individual being a portion of the divine. So there is no insuperable bar to this being supramental. It is no doubt impossible for the human nature, being mental in its basis, to overcome this ignorance and rise to or obtain the descent of the supermind by its own unaided effort, but by surrender to the divine, it can be done. One brings down into earth nature through his own consciousness and so opens the way for the others. But the change has to be repeated in each consciousness to become individually effective, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. To be continued.